Have you ever looked up at space and wondered, looked up at the moon, thought about what it took to get there, what it would take to get there? One man who did this was Werner von Braun, the German scientist, born March 23rd, 1912, so right before the start of World War I. He grew up in Germany and very quickly realized he had a deep interest in spaceflight and getting people to space. He realized that to do this you had to know math. And, he memorized calculus and trigonometry. After memorizing calculus and trigonometry, he started building his own rockets, tinkering, and working on his own. He later joined a little club of people who built and launched their own rockets. And one day they were test flying in the field, and some German officers were watching and took interest in von Braun. This is where his controversy really starts, is when he starts working for the military. Because his whole life he'd had a dream of putting somebody in space and somebody on the moon. But it becomes marred by his accomplishments become marred by what he had to do to get there. So the military offers to pay for him to finish his doctorate at the University of Berlin. It was about 1932. And he agrees. And afterwards he works for him. Actually, his doctorate was classified after he published it. It was deemed too detrimental or too vital for spaceflight understanding it, the discoveries and conclusions he had made in it. So it was locked away and kept away from the public. He immediately started work on a rocket, testing them and launching them into the Baltic Sea. And the rocket he built became known as the V2, or Vengeance Weapon 2. It was a terror weapon used by the Nazis, and it was the first ballistic missile the world had ever seen. This was a bit of a conflict for him. His whole life he dreamed of pointing them up at space, and now these beautiful, what he thought was beautiful creation, were used for terror. It was something he didn't agree with, but he realized there was nothing he could do. There was no way the Nazis would redirect his rockets into space. But he also saw the writing on the wall and realized that Germany was probably going to lose the war. And he knew that he wanted to surrender to the Americans, so he did everything he could to do just that. He used his knowledge of rockets as leverage to gain access to the Americans. And we actually jumped at the chance to have him and 125 scientists come over and continue their research. When he first got to America, he filled out his papers as an SS officer, which he was, and a member of the Nazi Party, which he also was. America glossed over that and put him to work in Texas, developing our own ballistic missile program. As the Cold War progressed and got hotter, the Russians started looking to space. We started looking into space. We knew we had the man to get us there, von Braun and his team. We moved into Alabama, where he continued his work and finally achieving his lifelong goal of pointing rockets into space and putting a man on the moon. He started working on the Saturn V rocket, which was the largest rocket ever created, only rivaled by the latest creation, which is NASA's Space Launch System, which hasn't even launched yet, actually. So, developing the Saturn V is his crowning achievement. It's what a lot of Americans remember him as. He was the head of NASA when it was first created, and their rocket division. His accomplishments in aerospace engineering are unparalleled by anybody else in the field. But it's equally as, there's an equal amount of conflict in what he did for the Germans in World War II. I would argue that despite his the conflict or the whatever disagreements you had with what he did for the Germans, he had to do that to get to America and help us beat the Russians in the Cold War. Something every American wanted to do. Another thing we were able to all stand behind. And while history may see him as a controversial figure, someone who cared little of others and escaped a lot of scrutiny, I believe he was someone who should be seen as a visionary. Someone who was able to see past the trivial borders and politics and explore the boundaries of human possibility.